in February of 2020, I attended the NSU MSD Strong event at Nova Southeastern University. It was 2 years after the tragic school shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School on February 14th, 2018, a day etched into the heart of South Florida and beyond. I remember hearing one of the teachers who was on campus that day speak about her healing journey. She shared how EMDR helped her find relief and begin to move forward. And it was the first time I truly heard what EMDR could do. I was struck. And then I heard today's guest, Brian Gong, speak as a community agent about EMDR, and something in me shifted. Even though I've been in the field since 2004, took a break after my son's accident in 2012, and came back in 2018, that day gave me a new lens on trauma healing. Fast forward to a Palm Beach mental health counselor event a month or so ago, and I spot Brian. The moment I realized it was him, I knew I had to ask him to be on the show. And today, we get to share this powerful conversation with you. My name is Diana, and this is the Holistic Counselor Podcast, where we explore the intersection of mental health, faith, and whole person healing. Whether you're a clinician, a survivor, or someone searching for hope, you're in the right place. This show is about informing, educating, and encouraging you with practical tools and heart-centered stories that remind you healing is possible, even if you don't have access to therapy right now. Brian Gong is the co-owner of Mangrove Therapy Group in Delray Beach, Florida, a private practice that specializes in trauma and addiction recovery by addressing the underlying emotional and psychological roots of suffering. He's a certified EMDR therapist, an EMDRIA-approved consultant, and a basic training facilitator. He also provides trauma-informed clinical supervision and mentorship and has presented widely on trauma, addiction, and family recovery. In 2018, Brian founded the Southeast Florida Trauma Recovery Network, offering pro bono EMDR therapy to survivors of the Parkland shooting. Today, he serves on the board of directors for trauma recovery, EMDR, humanitarian assistance programs, known as HAP in the EMDR community, which helps bring trauma training and treatment to underserved areas worldwide. This episode is full of wisdom, humility, and encouragement, I hope. If you've ever felt stuck in your pain, overwhelmed by shame, or unsure how to help a loved one battling addiction, this one's for you. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Diana. Happy to be here. Yeah, happy to be
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about, since I brought up how I first heard you, because I think it was like at the lunch. Listen, my memory, I can't believe it's that good, but it's because what happened that day at NSU really struck a chord. And I remember like we had the panel, we had the suicide prevention guy. And all of a sudden, you got up, I think it was after lunch, and you started talking about the pro bono work, and you just started talking about these things. You know, how did it shape your mission in trauma recovery work? Like,
Hmm.
why you started this nonprofit?
Yeah, that's a great question. To be honest, I totally forgot about that event until you brought it up a month ago, and it was great seeing you again. And it feels surprising anytime someone can remember me from years before. But that that was a crazy year. I mean, that our entire community was um, crushed by the tragedy of what happened, and I think a lot of therapists were just eager to do some part in the recovery process. And I'm an EMDR nerd. EMDR is an evidence-based therapy that's super effective at resolving traumatic memories. And so for a traumatic situation like the shooting at the high school, I knew that EMDR would be a great mechanism for helping to get the community back to baseline. And so this organization that I'm affiliated with, they maintain these networks of trauma recovery networks, right? These TRNs of people who live in the area that
Okay.
agree to provide pro bono EMDR therapy to to those who've been impacted by community disasters because EMDR is fast, it's effective, and so if I remember correctly, I think I was going to try to recruit people to just bring awareness that we're around, ready to help.
Yeah, I think that was it. Like because I think it was like, here, look at what I did. I'm a nerd as well, but not an EMDR nerd. I'm learning to be an
Mm.
EMDR. But look, I
Good.
printed out the actual flyer that you were part
Wow.
of, and that was it. It was around 12 o'clock where we had the alumni community and everything, and we got every agency, and it was you, part of your agency. You spoke up and you had like 10, 15 minutes to talk about what you were doing. And I was like, wow. Like, first, that teacher that was part of the panel talked about EMDR and how that actually
Mm.
helped her, while other people were, that when you go through let's just go right in there. When you go through a tragedy, like a school shooting, a
Mm.
war. I mean, I've done EMDR for childhood PTSD. Um, let's
Thanks for
explain
sharing.
to the audience, Brian, because to me, I never heard of it until that time frame.
No
Honestly,
one's
20.
ever heard of it until they need it. And then some
Yeah.
therapist is like, hey, I think this
Yeah.
could really help you. And people are like,
Yeah.
EMR? No,
Yeah.
EMR. And so maybe they should have had a different name when they first came up with it, but it is what it is, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, it stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it's based on the idea that current issues are the result of insufficiently processed, maladaptively stored memories from the past, right? So you know, we go through life, we experience adversity, and for the most part, we talk about it, we think about it, we dream about it, and then no big deal. It's in the past. It's it's just a part of our story. But some experiences are beyond our ability to process at the time. And so whatever doesn't get processed essentially kind of gets stuck. And
Mhm.
then this leads to a whole bunch of potential psychological problems, right? Because this stuck material can easily be triggered and can show up intrusively in a person's life. And so, obviously, so the memory of a shooting lingers with people because it's so powerful that a person's not able to process at the time. And then it lingers in the form of, flashbacks, nightmares, really terrible feelings and body sensations. And so with EMDR, um, for that an event like that, we go and we process the memory of the shooting and and all the different pieces of it. And as a result, the related symptoms of that unresolved memory go away. And it's really amazing.
So how though? Let's go there because if you're a EMDR nerd, then you can actually answer these scientific questions of like how is it hypnosis? Is it like I know like for me, I had the things in my hand. Maybe you could explain
Mm-hmm.
because I want to teach whoever it is trying to learn this without using therapies like I call it like because we have a
Hmm.
language, Brian. Like you could say
Yeah.
TRN and I'll understand it or whatever
Hmm.
DSM, all that stuff, but when we're talking now between you and me, let's pretend like the person just arrived to Earth and we're teaching them completely like EMDR, right? So, what are the things
Absolutely.
called that are in your hands? Because I use the ones in my hand and the light at the same time.
Yeah. So let me start here. So like many things, EMDR was stumbled across by happenstance, right? So there was a psychologist in California named Francine Shapiro, and she had been diagnosed with cancer. And it's obviously a very distressing experience. And
Yeah.
the story goes that she's in a park, and she's kind of looking around. Her eyes are kind of moving back and forth on their own. All of a sudden, she realized that you know the experience of finding out about the cancer didn't feel as distressing anymore. Instead of dread for the future, there was a sense of optimism. So she's like, okay, what happened there? And so from that, she did her very first two studies that she published on EMDR, and she took Vietnam War veterans and she took sexual assault survivors, and she said, think about the bad memories and then follow my fingers with your eyes. And she would do these sets of eye movements and she would ask for feedback in between. What are you noticing now? And people would report these crazy phenomenon happening, right? We're like, oh, starting to feel a little better. Oh, you know what? That wasn't my fault. That was just a kid. And there was sort of this metabolizing of these memories that were really powerful still decades later. And the memories became more neutral. The negative associations related to the experiences became more adaptive. These experiences that were sort of stuck in trauma time, right? From almost as if from the eyes, as if they're actually happening.
Yeah.
And people are able to see them as old, um, with more of mature understanding. And so from that point, EMDR, was developed over the course of the next couple of decades into what it is today. Why does it work? I wish I could tell you that. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know why talk therapy works. We don't know what's happening in the brain that helps us feel better when we talk about things.
Mhm.
I hope one day we can understand more about what happens on a cellular level, but all we know is that when we take distressing memories and we add bilateral stimulation, eye movements, back and forth tapping,
Mhm.
little alternating vibration
Mhm.
paddles, even audio tones,
Mhm.
somehow it helps the mind to process experiences that were once stuck and that seem to be unmovable by just kind of talking about them verbally. So it's pretty fascinating. It's very effective and it's backed by a ton of research.
How long's it been around?
It's been around since the late 80s when she stumbled
Ladies.
across it and published those first two
Okay.
studies. Yeah.
So here's what I think because since I've experienced it, I really feel, because you have the left brain, the emotional brain, and all that,
Hmm.
and when something is stuck, first of all, giving permission for it to come out of you. So somatic
Hmm.
movement of it, right? To me, it was like a somatic thing. It's also the aha moments, like like it jarred the logical
Yeah.
with the emotional, like because a lot of clients, I'm sure you go through this too, is where they come in with so much guilt and shame,
Hmm.
right? And of things that happen to them, and they're keeping it a secret or they're keeping it inside. And for us, it's not like we're priests or anything, but when you get to let it out,
Yeah.
right? And it's like confessing it or putting it out there in a safe space. And then you're somatically moving it at the same
Hmm.
time and you're realizing things and it just gives you a like I had the situation with me since I was about I would say 5 years old. I had no idea that's why a certain thing kept making me do what I was doing. And I will share with you what it was. It was like every time I heard of ambulances, every time I was realizing like I would get disassociated or
Hmm.
stuck.
Yeah.
So Brian, then I was doing yoga and then these flashbacks were happening. I'm like, what is this? What is this? Because it's stored situations in our system. And that's why I started the EMDR. That's why I went into it and began going, oh my God, I'm in my late 40s. What is this? Like, what?
Yeah.
But now I did EMDR. I could hear the ambulance and I have you still remember the situation, but it's not the emotional part where now I'm frozen or I'm crying or I get snappy or can you explain that a little?
Yeah, that's so powerful. I appreciate sharing that. That's yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, so like, we go through these hard experiences, and at 5 years old, most 5 year olds don't have the cognitive capacity to understand things that have happened to them or the emotional maturity to process things in a healthy way. So you take an adverse experience, you combine it with a lack of outlet to be able to express and process these powerful emotions, and it just gets stuck, right? It's like all this stuff gets put in a box, and we put the lid on and we put it in the closet, hoping to never think about it again. But there's always stuff coming out of the box, right? There's
Yeah.
always crap leaking out, getting triggered, getting uh, bumped on, and then there's these symptoms that seem to relate to this old experience, and kids take everything personal, right? I mean, as an adult, if there was a kid experiencing some traumatic situation, we would never say, "Oh, that kid's bad. That kid's, shameful."
Well, some people do, and that's the problem.
Well,
But anyway, we won't go there.
that that is true. That is true. Sometimes the biggest traumatic component of a situation is the
Right.
invalidation that family or
Mm-hmm.
caregivers give after a difficult event. So you're absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for the most part, as an adult, we can understand with more nuance that it wasn't the kid's fault. There was nothing they could do. And yet, when we go through something, especially at a young age, it feels very personal, like we ought to have stopped it. I should have known better. There's just this negative sense of shame that comes about, and being able to process those original memories so that that inappropriate shame and negative energy can be released is an amazing opportunity. So I encourage everyone to do that work.
Yeah. So let's talk about shame. It's sneaky, paralyzing, and
Hmm.
often masked by addiction, perfectionism, or silence.
Yeah,
So, what's one body based or soul based tool you use to help clients face their shame instead of being swallowed by it?
that's a great question. And it's just interesting because the things that we do to cope with shame that you just mentioned often create more shame, and then the cycle goes on. So, man, if I had to pick one thing, it makes me think of Brene Brown, right?
Mm,
Has done a lot of research on shame, and she says shame thrives in secrecy, and so it's really important for us to be able to talk about these things with a safe person who won't judge and who won't just give unsolicited advice, right? Who will listen to us with compassion and a non-judgmental perspective.
mm,
And it's very empowering, right? And it feels really good to be able to verbalize that with someone else. And so I guess I would encourage someone to talk about it. When I used to work in residential treatment, um, we used to give people this assignment. If you knew blank about me,
mm,
would you still love me? And then I would ask them to make a list of all the things that would fit into the blank,
mhm,
and 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 then share it with the group, right? And it would basically highlight all the things that we feel shameful about, that we want to keep hidden, that we want to keep secret, that we don't want the world to know because of how we fear others will perceive us. And by identifying these and sharing them with a safe environment, it ends up being like a really cathartic and healing experience. And then
yeah.
I would recommend, if I'm allowed to have another option,
Yes, please
to
talk
find an
about it.
EMDR therapist to work through this stuff because
Yeah.
we go through life, we're not born with these negative beliefs about ourselves or this shame, right? We're born with a clean slate, and our experiences, positive and negative, shape how we see ourselves, right? And so, if I grow up with a lot of nurturance, consistency, and positive experiences, I grow up believing that I'm pretty worthwhile. I'm good enough, right? And I have value as a person. But if I grow up in a critical system that's overly harsh, if I experience, traumatic situations, I might develop these negative beliefs of I'm bad, I'm not good enough, I don't matter. And and like we were talking about with EMDR, we can go back, identify where these negative beliefs and these feelings come from,
Mhm.
um, and process those just the same way we would process, these other big T traumas like a shooting or something like that. Process the
Yeah.
memories of a critical parent, teasing, bullying, just feeling different, like I don't belong. These
Mhm.
these feelings of defectiveness and inadequacy carry through into adulthood to where people try to cope in all different ways that uh don't really actually heal the original wounds that were there, when they were developed.
Yeah.
So
Like,
I think I chose a few
no.
strategies.
I love that. I want more. Like if there's more, Brian, honestly, if there are more strategies, because not everyone could afford quality therapy. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mm.
or I love that you have where you do pro bono. Is this group still do pro bono work?
We've kind of disorganized, and a colleague and I are putting in efforts now actually to revamp because unfortunately something bad like that is going to happen again in the community.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't, but
No,
with the nature of climate change, natural disasters,
just the right
something bad's going to
people.
happen, and we want to be
Right.
ready to be able to respond. But yeah, the
Yes.
system is broken. I mean, there's a lot of people who need help and can't afford it. There's a lot of people who need help and don't believe that help is available. We used to think that. trauma, PTSD was something you just had to kind of live with and get used to. And
Yeah.
I guess I would love your listeners to know that there are effective therapies to resolve their traumatic symptoms. And so if they do have access, I encourage people to go seek
Yeah.
it out.
Well, what I usually say is that you're gonna, I hate to say it this way, but you're gonna pay either way.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you could either pay now for either prevention or getting the tools you need and the skill set so you can, you know, get through it. Because we have to go through things. Like people want to ignore it or pretend it's not happening or blame everybody else. All right. And so it
Mm-hmm.
is understanding like if not, it's going to build up because that's how I also see what EMDR helped me process and work through was, it was a buildup of the narratives, the stories of the village that raised us, and then
Mm-hmm.
certain situations, traumatic events happen, big T, little t. And what we mean by that, guys, it's like, there's the war because people say, oh, me, I didn't have any trauma. I was never in a war and I was never raped. And I'm like, no, it's understanding that there's wounds because the word
I like
trauma
that
is so,
word, wounds.
yeah,
Yeah.
the word trauma nowadays is like so many other psychological words in TikTok are overused to a place where then it gets numbed out and then everybody is
Mm.
having this situation, which honestly, after 2020, I really think that everybody does have trauma
Yeah.
for real, you know? But these wounds will store up and that's where we need to realize like, okay, how do we be still to understand it so we can heal these wounds and make them effective
Mm.
scars instead of them being open all the time and now we're reacting in the wound constantly.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
research shows that trauma is cumulative, right? And I don't know, it's the universe's paradox. Things we avoid get worse, right?
yeah,
And yet I understand why you avoid, right? I mean, I understand why someone doesn't. Why would anyone want to think about something that
mhm,
causes them so much distress?
right,
Actually, it's one of the criteria to have a PTSD diagnosis. There needs to be some level of avoidance because it makes sense. People don't want to feel these yucky feelings.
no,
And uh, Yet there's no way around it. We find.
right,
And one day maybe there'll be some magic wand that will allow us to, and then the traumatic
yeah,
symptoms are gone.
yeah,
But I'm not sure if we'll ever get there because there is a going through something that is so characteristic of healing and overcoming challenges.
hmm,
But yeah, I get it. It's scary. What people. People would rather wrestle an alligator than talk about their feelings in therapy, and they'd rather jump out of a plane. And so when people choose not to do it, I almost want to, he's like, don't you see the life you can have? And at the same time, I got to respect people's personal choices because I understand. And then later, when it all comes spilling out
yeah,
because they can no longer contain it, their closet is so full of boxes that the boxes are just flowing out.
right.
Um, that's when oftentimes people will come into therapy and they say, "Help me, everything's out now," and you're like, "Whoa, okay,
Mm,
let's figure this out."
yeah. One
And
box at a time.
one box at a time, and yeah, so if people have the opportunity to get ahead of that
Yeah.
before it all spills out, it's such an amazing opportunity for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about addiction a little because that's something that you really work in, right? Because to me, how I see addiction, it's about those wounds that, like, I don't ever picture a 5, a 6-year-old going, when I grow up, I want to be an addict, or when I grow up, I want to be
Mhm.
someone that's addicted to alcohol or cocaine. And then there's so much shame on that too, because I do have clients that I sometimes have to refer out because I am not, they need to go
Mhm.
to a outpatient or inpatient program
Sure.
and because they do need that help but the shame about it like oh my goodness no I have this under control but the whole family is like going you're a mess so let's talk about addiction a little and EMDR like how's that work.
Yeah, when you mentioned a vicious cycle, right? Because you a person develops an addiction, and uh, and and then they feel ashamed about their behavior, right? Because it doesn't feel good lying and cheating and doing all that stuff. And then what do you do with that shame? You got to use more of the addictive substance or behavior in order to
Or
counteract
or
that. And
use
so you're
different
stuck,
ones.
stuck in this vicious cycle. And
Yeah.
so we named our practice actually Mangrove Therapy Group because of the mangrove tree, which is known for its roots. And so it's all about getting at the root of the issue. And so,
Oh, I love
addiction is a
that.
very complex process, genetics, social learning. But recently, a lot of research and attention has been focused on the relationship between adversity and addiction, right? People like Gabor Mate have been talking about how unresolved trauma leads to addiction, right? It's easy to see how someone who grows up with nightmares or flashbacks or an intense feeling of shame
Hmm.
from something bad that happened to them will resort to numbing themselves out or medicating with something like a drug because it works so well at calming those feelings until it doesn't, right? And then if you think
Right.
about it, everything we avoid gets worse. So this
Hmm.
unresolved trauma is festering inside. We just have to use more in order to calm that down, and often comes into a development of an addiction. And so recovery requires at some point to address whatever's underneath the surface that's sort of fueling that process. And then we find we have to work, as an EMDR therapist, a lot of times we'll work through, some of the underlying trauma that led to the development of these compulsive behaviors. But
Yeah.
also we have to work through the experiences in addiction of doing things they normally never would have done because they were sort of a slave to their substance. And so
Right.
there's becomes a lots of layers to someone who's at that point.
Yeah. I like how you put that, a slave to their substance, because that's what ends up happening. You become so it becomes an idol in your life due to you wanting not to feel those what us humans I think are bad feelings, like the
Mhm.
sadness, the depression, the anxiety, and then we put these things in our system. And it doesn't only have to be drugs. I mean, there is shopping addiction. There's so many out there.
Yeah.
Anything actually, uh, you know uh, just that could be an addiction in itself when it becomes just this. I don't know how to explain it, but
Yeah, I mean,
this.
addiction is avoidance essentially. It's a way to not have to feel these things.
Hmm.
And yet, like you mentioned, and we talked about, feeling these things is what gets us through the situation. And so
Right,
we're entering this sort of maladaptive process where things just keep getting worse and worse.
right.
And so some of the first stages of addiction treatment is, it sounds so cliche, but it's like getting in touch with your emotions, right? And it's going to the emotion gym. And I remember hearing someone talk about, he's like, yeah, the good thing about getting sober is you get to feel your feelings. And the bad thing about getting sober is you get to feel your feelings. And I'm like, I know what the guy's talking about
Yeah.
because it for people who have been avoiding this for such a long time,
Hmm.
all emotions are powerful, and
Yes.
developing a relationship with them, building up a tolerance for them, realizing they're not going to kill you, that they're a part of life, almost practicing this embodiment of whatever's happening inside is the key to being in control of that, and not resorting to these maladaptive strategies.
Yeah. I mean, this is why I named my company Through the Valley Therapy, because you got to go through the valley to get to your
Mhm.
mountaintop. You got to go
Oh,
through
okay.
it, not around it. Well, it's based out of Psalm 23, verse 4.
Mhm.
Even though I walk through the shadow of the valley, wait, no, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will feel no evil. And because I am a faith-based practitioner and I'm trying to break stigma in churches and in my community of the BIPOC community, because sometimes what happens is we carry a lot of shame in churches and a lot of shame and guilt in both churches and in the Black and brown and minority community, due to the collectivism of these cultures. And
Mhm.
it's like when we don't want to talk about it or we blame the devil, we give Satan way too much power. And
Mhm.
I'm sorry, like that, to understand that God made it all, in my opinion, the biology, the psychology, and the theology, that we're all these unique thumbprints. At the same time, we're all humans trying to live on this earth together. And and
Yeah.
so, like, you know, as you are teaching and helping people grow, because basically you're giving them a really great skill set. what is it that you use as well? Do you give your clients like deliverables or take home task or homework or something in between sessions? Or like what do you see as like the most powerful
Mhm.
aspect of EMDR?
Yeah, so I mean, so personally, I like homework, but I mean, I couldn't pay most people to do homework, unfortunately. So, but obviously, we have to pick and choose what our clients are willing to do. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, so working through trauma is such an important part of the process, but just like you're not going to go to a surgeon and do surgery on that first day, there's a preparation that happens, right? If we want to do things effectively and
Hmm.
efficiently, we have to help our clients prepare for going there, so to speak, by teaching them emotional regulation skills, addressing maybe any safety issues, right? Because if you're going to go there, it's going to bring up some stuff. It's hard to clean out a room without kicking up some dust, and we have to be able to manage the dust in an effective way. And so a part of that preliminary process is helping clients manage strong emotional states. Now, some clients are ready to go right off the bat. They
Hmm.
already come in with this sense of regulation and attunement that they can go there with you pretty soon. And for others, it just takes a little while. And so yeah, so part of the process of trauma therapy is preparing, it's determining what pace we can go, it's building a relationship, right? Because um, it takes a lot of trust, right? I'm saying, hey, follow me. We're gonna focus on this stuff that you've never wanted to even think about
Yeah.
ever again. Um, some of the stuff's so bad that you don't even remember it happening. That's how much your brain wants to keep it out of your awareness. And and if and so I need you to trust me that I got you,
Hmm.
that I have the competence to be able to guide you through the work effectively, but that I'm also going to take the process really seriously, and it feels like an honor, to be honest. It feels like an honor when someone trusts me with this material that they haven't want to talk about with anyone, and that they're willing to go there with me. It's a yeah,
Yeah.
it's a it keeps me going.
Yeah. I mean, you have to build that rapport. And it
Yes.
is an honor. To me, it is an honor to walk alongside a human being doing the work.
Hmm.
Because sometimes you get human beings that come in and they just want some miracle cure or
Hmm.
snake oil or something like here, just I don't want to feel this anymore and they're in crisis, right? So let's talk about that because we do. Most people that do end up going to therapy are in crisis mode, not prevention
Hmm.
mode, which if we did more preventing and breaking stigma of the word therapy, that doesn't mean that you're crazy when you go to a therapist. Please understand that, people. Because honestly, like in my culture, the second, even in like some of my family members, they're like, "What do you do?" And I say, "Oh, trabaja con los locos," which means you work with crazy. And I'm like, "No, I don't. I work with people that are wanting to do the work and heal wounds, and work with people
Hmm.
because of the people around them that don't want to go."
Yeah, Asian people, I'm Chinese American. Asian people are an underserved community also, and there's a stigma for mental health. And so hopefully that's changing through
Yeah.
our
Can we
work.
talk about that a little bit, Brian? I didn't want
Sure.
to. Yeah, because to me that's important. You're right. You're part of our community. You are like of understanding that a culture, Asian, Latin, or Black, or American, Haitian, Creole, whatever it is, where it come from. A lot of us that come from collective. Are you first generation or second generation or how?
My mom came here when she was 6, and
Mhm.
my dad was born here. So
Okay.
depending on how you look at it, what's first generation? Some people say first generation is first generation born here, or first generation that comes
That
here.
came here. I
Okay.
think of it first. I'm second generation. My mom is from a different country and my dad's from Puerto Rico, which is that a different country?
Okay.
It is, sorta. It's a U.S. territory. I don't know. But yeah, so then you must
So I
have
guess I'm
had,
2.5. 2.5, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. So Brian, I want to ask, like growing up, because I know for me how I felt. I was born in America, but at home it was a whole different culture. So I would go to the school systems. I looked different.
Hmm.
And you're trying to find your place in the American system, which I love my country. And then you go home and it's a whole different, like, no, no, this is, and so I, most of my life didn't feel like I belonged anywhere just because of that. Did you have that same experience? How was it for you?
Yeah, so yeah, I'm glad you brought up the word belonging because actually in 2020 with all the George Floyd stuff, it brought a lot of emphasis on people's shared experience of disconnection or not belonging. And I remember a lot of people were looking for therapists who had similar demographic or ethnic identities because they wanted to feel like the person understood. And more people were actually bringing their experiences of feeling like they didn't belong into the therapy room. And I thought it was great, right? Because people weren't, it wasn't on anyone's radar really.
Right.
And even in the EMDR community, we there were several themes related to trauma, this defectiveness and responsibility, the safety, vulnerability, this power and control. And actually, in 2020, a lot of the bigwig EMDR people got together and they realized, this connection and belonging needs to be added to the training because it it represents the struggle of so many people in a different way than those other ones. And yeah, and I felt that because I grew up we grew up in Long Island and then we moved down to suburban Maryland. But there weren't that many Asian people, at my school. And yeah, I remember feeling different. My sister, she could make friends no matter where we went. We moved a lot. Me, it was harder. And yeah, you look around the room and no one really looks at me, and looks like me. And there some stereotypes that, would really, cause me to feel self-conscious,
Yeah.
regardless of whether or not I fit them in any way. And
Right.
yeah, it is a big part of my story, teasing,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
well,
Brian.
well, pulling their eyes, and making sounds, and yeah, it was a big part of of the journey,
Mm-hmm.
and something that I've done a lot of work on, in the latter part of my life.
So you went into therapy too.
Yeah, of
That's what
course.
I'm,
Yeah,
yeah, good.
well, they say all the best therapists have their own therapists.
That's
We all have,
right.
none of us get through life unscathed, and
Yeah.
we uh, we all have work to do.
Yeah. And this is like to me, Brian, you know, you're I hate to say a unicorn, but you are. Like to me, like I think it's important for all of us to be represented. Because in the beginning,
Mhm.
how long, where did you graduate from and how long have you been in the therapeutic field?
I've been a therapist for I think a little over 10 years, and I
Okay.
went to FAU's clinical mental health counseling program.
Okay, so let me ask you this now, because now that we're on this subject of two humans that are considered minorities
Uh-huh.
in this, you know, how did you feel about the DSM? Because I know that's something that really frustrated me back
Hmm.
in the early 2000s was because I'm like, wait a minute, who wrote this? And why are we not taking consideration like someone
Hmm.
that is a spiritual aspect, say a culture that has a heart, a strong spiritual background, and now you're saying, well, they hear a spirit, but now I'm going to diagnose him with schizophrenia because of many of these
Hmm.
people that were above me or wrote this, I think it was TR3 or, DSM-3 TR or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah.
you did not take into consideration the cultural aspect of things. I know that we've come a little bit of a way of understanding now because of the George Floyd and things
Hmm.
have to be spoken about. I agree on that. And spoken about with respect and understanding because what I felt and saw during those, because I was working at alternative school during that whole thing. And so most of my clientels were young black men.
Hmm.
And I feel, like to me, it's like we have to have this discussion in our society for our mental health. And it isn't about blaming or shaming. It's about
Hmm.
understanding, right? So for you, how'd you see that? The whole, like what they told us that is our Bible, because basically that's what I was told. The DSM is our Bible, and I'm sitting there like,
Yeah, as a with we have a practice, so we don't have to diagnose in order to get reimbursed by insurance. So it's a luxury, and I do see some clinical utility, in diagnosing and being able to categorize various things. But honestly, I don't diagnose much. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose. If someone has depression,
Right.
it doesn't really tell me much about why or right. So it's like if you have a headache, um, you could be dehydrated, you could have an aneurysm, right? You could be hemorrhaging. Uh, there could be a tumor, and it
Mhm.
doesn't really help the treatment by just knowing that you have a headache. And the same thing with depression. I want to know like what happened, what was the precipitating event, what vulnerabilities do you come into life with that lead you more predisposed to getting knocked off your feet when something bad happens. That's more relevant to me as a trauma therapist because we can then go back and work through some of that adversity. Uh,
Mhm.
but but putting a number on it and giving it a name of major depressive disorder doesn't really have any use for me aside from, hey, I mean, you had a really hard time when this bad thing happened. Let's focus on that.
Wow. Oh, I love that. Yeah,
I have it on the shelf and I pull it
yeah,
out every once in a while when
yeah, me
when
too.
when I need to. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. Because sometimes I do. It is to me sometimes for boundaries or to know how to go into that space with the client. Because to me, like anxiety and depression are symptoms. Like
Mm-hmm.
you were just saying, like it could be, honestly, it could be a 19-year-old with low testosterone due to microplastics.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's why they're super depressed. It's not, and then you have that along with, oh, they're up all night smoking pot and playing video games. So
Exactly.
so
But the
things like
treatments may be very different, right? If someone has
yes,
some medical issue versus
right.
someone a behavioral issue. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, we're just not technologically equipped to understand what is happening at the root on like a biological level in order to
Right.
use that as a diagnosis, like the
Right.
like the medical professionals are.
Right.
And I hope one day we are.
I think we're heading that way. I hear it from some people in the like becoming doctors and stuff that they're now finally putting in like nutrition. Back in the day, it was like maybe 1, 2 hours of that kind of of
Hmm.
class, and now they're actually making it part of becoming a doctor to understand the whole being, right? So, I know I could talk to you for another hour or two, but I'm sure you have to go and I have clients as well. But I want to know what steps, if the listener is like really curious about EMDR or can't afford it yet, or like, is there anything that they can do, anything they can read? Is there anything out there that we could give them that they could pick up on their own for now? In order to start getting help. Because sometimes you're right. I was able to go to EMDR and do it quickly. I'm a therapist,
Hmm.
I'm a researcher. I
Yeah.
love to really learn. But like for someone that doesn't even know where to start, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I gotta remind myself sometimes that a lot of people don't know how to navigate the system. And if you went to Google and you started typing things in, you would get possibly too much stuff and unable to know where to start or what to sift through. And I would say that there's a lot of really great stuff out there, but you got to be careful on what you find on the internet. And so if you
Yeah.
just type in "does EMDR work," you're probably going to get a hit at the top of the page that says um, no, it's a pseudoscience. But the truth is, it's considered an evidence-based therapy with tons of research. And so if anyone's interested in EMDR, I would recommend they go to the EMDR International Association, which is our national organization, and they have some pretty good information there that you can look at. The EMDR Institute
Hmm.
also has a lot of information on research and what EMDR are all about. That was the institute that was developed by Francine Shapiro, who founded EMDR. I'm personally happy to talk to anyone. I wrote a blog recently on how to get trained in EMDR because so many people, therapists, would be like, "Hey, uh, how do I get trained in EMDR?" And so instead of typing up this long email, I'm like, "No, I just send them a link." So,
Yes,
uh,
smart. All right. So
yeah,
where can we find you then?
yeah. So, mangrovetherapy.com. Our office is in East Delray Beach.
Mhm.
I'm very accessible. We get pretty busy, but I I don't know. I feel like it's the karma rule. Like I'm happy to take some time to help someone because I don't know, it's a good thing to do. And
Yeah,
it's
I love that.
I'm sure that they are struggling, more than I am. So I'm happy to share. And there are a lot of people who work at community agencies who are now trained in EMDR. So
Really?
it's not this elite therapy that
Okay.
only, very expensive clinicians can provide. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm a I volunteer for this organization that brings low-cost trainings into underserved communities. We only train government agencies and nonprofits
And what's the name
for the
again?
reason of increasing the capacity of people trained in
Yes.
EMDR in these areas. So you'd be surprised, people who need help and can't afford it, they can possibly find people trained and
Mm-hmm.
skilled in EMDR at
Yeah.
a local community agency for sure.
What's the name of again, what was the name? I think I said it right.
Which name?
The one that you just said that you train.
Oh yeah, it's trauma recovery, EMDR, humanitarian assistance programs. It was also founded by Francine Shapiro, and we we provide, it's an all volunteer faculty. We provide low cost training to underserved communities. So,
Yeah.
years ago they would go to third world countries to do
Hmm.
trainings because there were no EMDR therapists there. And
Yeah.
now these countries have their own EMDR networks and
I love it.
organizations, and it's really beautiful. And so now we're really mostly doing domestic work,
Okay.
training, nonprofits and
Is there any books you recommend a person to listen to that to get them to understand trauma more in their system? You know what I mean? Like, is there anything like any other people? Because you did mention Dr. Gabor Mate. Are you talking
yeah.
about his book, The Myth of Normal, or the other one, something about the hungry ghosts?
I think he weaves a lot of his views into most of his books.
Yeah.
And Body Keeps the Score is a pretty good piece of general information on the
Hmm.
impacts of trauma.
Hmm.
And he probably sold like a bajillion copies.
Yes.
Trauma and Recovery is an old classic. It was
Really?
written by this woman, Judith Herman. It's
Okay.
considered a pretty classic text, and she's the one who coined the term complex PTSD. And so she writes a lot about the difference between, simple PTSD and something that's a little more,
Mhm.
it's a little different
Yeah.
when a person has, developmental childhood trauma. So that's a book I definitely would recommend as well. It's a little older, but it's a classic for sure. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of great stuff out there. There's a lot of great stuff out there.
Do you have, is the EMDR network have a resource page maybe for somebody? I mean, or do you have one at all?
We don't have a resource page. I find it so hard to pick and choose
True.
which resources to include on a page.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you do you get people asking you to put their organization on your resources page or to create
Yeah.
a page?
And yeah, and I'm like, nope, sorry. I mean,
Oh,
I have
same.
to really, really research you, and I'm already researching
Uh,
enough. On you know what a kit is? A KIT. I saw this on Therapy in a Nutshell. She's
uh-uh,
got a great YouTube. I mean, she's pretty big, Therapy in a Nutshell, and I use some of her videos for some of my clients because
uh,
some of them like to watch videos, not do actual homework.
sure.
So I created a kit, which is just all the books I've ever has that helped me is on one link. You know how you're like on a blog, one link?
Oh, I like that. Yeah.
I have this, it's called Kitco or something like that, but it's for my company only. And like everything, I'm telling you, when I say everything that I feel that has helped me on my healing journey, and I'm still on it, guys. It doesn't mean I'm fully, and I don't think and no human will ever. We live in a world that has a lot of hurt, but a lot of love. You know, it's both. It's
Mhm.
having both and understanding that this is life. Some people get addicted to just wanting to be happy all the time, Brian, and that's
I'm
not
gonna check out
reality
that
either.
Kitco. I love reading also. So it sounds like that's something we share. Also, we love plants. It sounds
I
like. Uh,
know. I
yeah,
love it.
I have so many books in my queue. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
I got to get that book, but only so much time to read. And
right.
that's a
And
great
I'm
idea.
Yeah, and then for whatever helped you or what you think would help your clientele or anybody like on a resource because there's people if you're writing a blog, someone from a different country might come to your blog and then want to know and then they see that oh, this book, I never heard of this book. That's what I mean. We're all interconnected. We might
Mm,
have our own thumbprint and we're unique, but at the same time, we are human and we're
We
interconnected.
write a lot of blogs. We
I
try to
love that.
put out a couple blogs a month, and a
Okay,
lot on
good.
EMDR. So people are more than welcome to check it out.
That's a
Uh,
resource in itself, a blog.
yeah, we're our whole practice are EMDR nerds. It's a requirement when we hire new people is that they have a lot of experience and skill in EMDR, and it's just something
Yeah.
we really believe in.
Yeah.
Getting at the root.
Yes, I love that. That's your tagline on your email. I saw something about the root.
Oh yeah, change it up every once in a while. I don't remember what it is now, but
It's
yeah,
root. It's Rumi. R-U-M-I.
oh
Rumi.
yeah,
It
yeah,
was
yeah. Got
something
it.
like that.
You gotta get at the root.
Yeah, I love that. Is there anything else you want to say before we say goodbye?
No, I appreciate the invitation. You have a really great, calm voice, perfect for a podcast.
Thanks.
I love finding out things that we have in common. I do believe that most people have more in common than they have different, and I wish that people would recognize that. But no, I
Yeah.
just appreciate the opportunity to be on here to talk about EMDR and trauma healing.
Yes, Brian, thank you for coming. And I was so excited. That's just so weird how it was years ago. I'll never forget you and what you said. Then I run into you, and then you said yes, and I'm like, oh, I love this.
And here
So
we are.
thank you so much for coming on. And listener, please do not forget to trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye. And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.